Welcome to Utah Stories. So, for a while now, we've been profiling transformation stories of people who came from really tough places or made some really bad decisions and have completely transformed their lives through the Other Side Academy. Today is no exception. Today on the program, Nicholas is with me. Thanks for joining me, Nicholas.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Richard.
I didn't ask you your last name.
Smith.
Smith.
Pretty
That's easy.
generic, yeah.
So, I guess let's start with a little bit about your background. You moved to Vernal as a kid from California. When did you first start getting into trouble?
Pretty early. I had my first felony at 13, so I tried meth at 13. Really kind of took off. Some rough years right there. So,
What was it that kind of got you on that path and in that direction in the first place?
so my father was a severe alcoholic. He was actually deported when I was 8. Physical abuse, verbal abuse, all those things were pretty common in my household, especially after my dad left. My house would have been what you would consider trap house, I guess, if everybody knows what that means. But essentially, it's the place you would come to get your drugs. Yeah, and so most of my brothers, I'm six brothers altogether, no sisters. But most of them have moved out and went and lived with my aunt at some point in that time span. I stuck around and then used meth with my mom at the age of 13 for the first time. And didn't stop until 28 years old. So that was kind of the cycle. But small town, using drugs, it's kind of a different ballgame when it comes to being arrested and cops profiling you. And, littering charges are on my record, so. Yeah.
Wow. You can't even begin to imagine a kid doing math with his mom at 13.
So Dare was in school, we, seen the drug briefcase back then. They'd come and tell you all the bad things. I went to church even up to this point. I had church as a part of my life. Every Sunday I'd go with my aunt. She'd take us to church. And so I knew right from wrong. There was a disconnect between what society kind of portrayed on TV and stuff and what home was like. I didn't know any different as a kid of, this isn't how everybody lives. I just assumed that, people had different homes. And for me, it was random people coming in at all hours of the night. But as I got older, I just wanted that connection with my mom. And she wasn't around. And the thing that she did pay attention to, it wasn't me. And so I seen it as an opportunity to connect with her. This is all looking back. I didn't know any of this at the age of 13. And, her solution to cope was, drug use. And so when her child started needing things, and that was her solution for a child as well. And so, not to mention, 13, I had my first felony, so I'm already a felon. They're already telling me that I'm going to end up in prison. I remember the first time I got out of detention, I did 30 days the first time. Second time it was 60. And after that it was 6 months. It was just the initial felonies for theft and car burglary. Small town, at night you're hanging out with your hoodlum friends. Thing to do is go around breaking the cars and steal change. That's what we did. A couple of the guys I was with, they got caught because they were bragging about it, and then they just, they drew a map to the police and explained every car that we hit in one night, and each car is a felony. Every car you break into. And they had parents at home. But when the cops showed up to my house and my mom, she just handed me to the cops. I got in trouble for bringing the cops to the house, not for the felonies or anything that I was doing at night. And the detective took me in a room and he showed me this big list. And, I didn't have any parent there to kind of defend that. But he's like, he wanted to charge me with over 100 counts. I know now that it was just a play. The 13-year-old doesn't know that. And he's like, well, if you admit to 2 of these, we'll drop 1 to a misdemeanor, and we'll give you 2 felonies. I'm like, do I have to go to jail? He's like, nope, we'll put you on probation. I said, deal. Pled to it. But that got me in the system, and I didn't get out of the system until I went to prison. And then when I got out of prison, I didn't make it 3 months before I got another felony.
And so you didn't get any initial drug charges. It was all just on burglarizing cars.
Don't put me into it, but it put you on to a probation officer. Then you're UA'd. And then anything after that, they UA you immediately.
Mhm.
And even now, I went to prison on marijuana charges.
So how young were you when you
Unfortunately.
first went to prison?
I was in my 20s, so 22, I think.
Mhm.
Same exact charges my mom went to prison on, actually. Yeah.
So was it drugs or was it
Drugs.
theft?
Yeah, because the theft was an initial thing, but after that, it was possession. And every time you catch a possession charge, it gets enhanced. And so right now, even to this day, if I went and got busted with a pill that wasn't supposed to be mine, it'd be a felony
Okay.
because of my history, my criminal history.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested in how a person gets wrapped up in the system like you described, because it seems like from the people I've talked to, once you're kind of wrapped up in it, it's really kind of tricky to get out, and it's hard to change in a manner where you feel hope that you're gonna live a productive life again. Did you get to a low point like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so interracial couple, small town. My dad's severe alcoholic and physically abusive to my mother, in and out with the cops. So they knew my family. By the time I got in the system, my mom was already known as a drug addict. I had two brothers that were starting down that path. My soon-to-be stepdad was well within that drug world. If they seen me walking down the street, I was getting pulled over. I was getting addressed. First time I go to DT, they explain to you that your likelihood of going to prison. I remember thinking, like, you don't know me. Like, I just barely got in trouble. How are you going to sit here and tell me that I'm going to end up in prison? I'm not a bad person.
Mhm.
I did end up in prison. A lot of the things they were saying were true, but I think most of that, or a lot of that, had to do with, my home life. The first time I got out of jail, it wasn't a conversation about, not jail, detention as a kid. It wasn't a conversation about how I made mistakes. It was, here's a bong, take a rip off this pot pipe, you missed. That was home for me. That's what it looked like at home. So people talk about it being low and hard to get out of. That was life. I didn't realize until I got older and all these emotions started piling on. I had my first kid at 18, and then I'm like, okay, I want to be a dad. I want to do better than my dad did. And I started trying and failing every step. I didn't know how to be sober. And even if I got sober, I didn't know how to function in society's terms. I'd been getting arrested. I would make it on average 3 to 6 months before I'd be back behind bars. So, in all actuality, that cage was more real to me than citizenship in this country. I always thought I was a good person, or at least part of me was decent. Even now, thinking about all the time I spent in a cage, they put you in jail. In my mind, the intention of jail is that you're a threat to society and that you're hurting people or hurting society and you're not safe to be around. I never thought that I fell under that category. I can look back and realize I hurt people, but most of my things were possession of drugs. That theft,
Non-violent crimes.
nonviolent.
Yeah.
I have some domestic stuff in there when I fought with my ex, things like that. But for the most part, it's like I wasn't out there stabbing or, I did my fair share of robbing and stuff like that, but I just never seen that. I couldn't break out of the system either. And I did that first prison sentence. At the time, I had 2 kids. So both my oldest boys were born. Didn't know how to be a father to either one of the kids. It was 2 different babies' moms, too. But in prison, they had some programs. I read a lot of books. I did the church thing. I read the Book of Mormon and the Bible and tried to find God. Had a solid plan for when I was released. This is the first time I'm going to be off paper, in my adult life. And so I have a whole plan. I'm going to get out there and be a dad. I'm going to tackle life. I'm going to do it all. And I made it 3 months. That life hit me right in the face. I had no idea how to pay bills. Nobody showed me how to pay bills, how to keep a budget. I didn't have any strong support system. All that same stuff that I grew up with was right there. And so I was either on the run or in jail, or you can't have a job while you're on the run. So you're essentially homeless and living from couch to couch.
Where did the opportunity come for the Other Side Academy, and how did you decide that would be a good idea?
So I'm sitting in jail, Uinta County Jail. I'm looking at options because I know prison didn't work. My kids are coming to see me, and my ex-wife are coming to the jail. And actually, I'm communicating them on visits. And I've already put them through the ringer. I'm telling you, I got arrested and I'm stashing, needles and pipes and stuff into my ex's couch as the cops are coming in, and they're pounding on the door. My ex-wife is gone at the store grabbing something for the kids, and the cops know I'm at her house. Of course they do. They recognize me to this day. And I'm just sitting there waiting for them to kick the door in to come get me. And when she comes home, she has to let him in. Her kids are in there. She's going to let him in. And they let him in. She lets him in, and they arrest me. And I'm bawling. I'm hysterical. Same cycle. Can't believe I'm headed back to prison. And I look over, and, there's my son. He's 17 now. He would have been maybe 11 at the time. And you want to ask me why I'm sober today. This is one that'll keeps me centered. But I looked over and I said, your dad's got to go away. I need you to, take care of your brother and your sister. His brother's 2 at the time. He just looks at me like it's just any other day of the week. This kid is 10, maybe 12 years old at the time, and grabs his little sister's hand, his little brother, and takes him upstairs. Didn't even faze him. There's no tears from this kid. Nothing. I'm bawling hysterically. And I just remember looking at him thinking he was more the man in that moment than I'd ever been. And I will never do that to my kids ever again.
Hello.
And that's what started. And I knew I wanted to do something different. But I'm sitting there, we're about 3 months into my sentence, waiting to see if I go back to prison. I'm going. They won't let me out on paper because I never do it on parole, right? They won't let me do that again. And this guy comes in, and he's complaining about this place he just ran from. And he's like, they put you to work right away. They yell at you when you make mistakes. And he's like describing it. He's like, well, I guess they barbecue on the weekends. That was probably the only good thing. And I'm listening to this guy, and he literally left and turned himself back in to come to jail so he'd go to prison. He'd obviously never been to prison before, but I'm like, you're an idiot. They give you a job. They put you to work right away. It's free to go to, and they yell at you. Like, ooh, what a big deal. Like, sign me up. Sounds like nothing I ever heard. And he gave me Dave DeRocher's phone number. And I called, set up an interview. He's asked me all the usual questions, what I've done, to have any violent crimes, about arsonists, things like that. And then he asked me, he's like, do you love your kids? And I sit in that. I'm like, yeah, Dave, I love my kids. Of course I do. And he lays it out, your kids are coming to see you. He tells me about that last interaction I had with my son, and he's like, if this is how you treat them and you say you love them, I'd hate to see how you treated them if you hated them. It was truth.